Let's talk about sewing together your finger puppet. To start, we are going to sew all of your details onto the front. So you should have a front piece, a back piece, any details that you want, your thread, and a needle. For right now, we're actually going to set the back piece to the side because you're not going to sew the details to both sides. You're just going to sew them to the front. So take your back piece and set it aside for right now. You just need the front piece and your details. Some of the details will go on the front, and then some details you might need to sew onto the edge. So we're gonna start with any details that need to get sewn onto the front. So I've got the front of my finger puppet, and I've got the nose. You can choose whatever color thread that you want to sew your pieces together, but typically it should match your finger puppet. So it could be the same color as what you're sewing, or it could just be another color from your finger puppet. So I'm going to use a light pink thread to sew the nose onto my pig. Take your thread, and the first step is to make a knot. So you're going to take your thread and knot the end of it so that you just have a little bit sticking out past your knot. I like to knot it twice to make it extra big so it doesn't slide through my felt, so I'm going to do that. Knot it twice, good to go. On the other end of my thread, I'm going to stick that through the eye of my needle, which is the hole in the needle. So I like to pinch the thread between my fingers and then slide it through the eye. Then I'm going to pull my thread through. This end of your thread, you can pull it through to be about as long as your finger or a little bit longer. That way it won't fall out of your needle. And then the long side of your thread will have that knot on it. When you go to sew the pieces onto your finger puppet, you're going to put it where you want it and hold it in place. Then you're going to take your needle, you're going to put it underneath your finger puppet and start from the bottom, and you're going to poke your needle up through the felt somewhere on the edge of whatever piece you're trying to sew down. So I'm going to hold my piece. This is where I want it to go. I'm going to put my needle underneath my felt, and I'm going to stick it up through both pieces of felt towards the edge of that piece and pull my needle all the way through. Once you feel that it's not coming through anymore, that means the knot has gone up to that side, so you're good to go. Remember, the basic stitch goes up and then down, and then you repeat going up and down until the piece is stitched all the way around the edge. So I just went up. Now I'm going to take my needle on top of my piece and I'm going to go down. I'm going to pull my thread all the way through until I see that stitch. It's going to look like you have a dashed line all the way around whatever piece that you're trying to sew. You're going to keep going up and down. You go behind your felt, you poke the needle up through the back, and then you poke your needle down through the front. I'm going to do this all the way around my piece so that it is secure and it does not fall off of my finger puppet. Remember, you're just sewing this to the front piece of your finger puppet. You're not sewing it to the back. The back piece should be set aside. So I'm going up and then down. To go up, remember your needle goes behind the felt. You kind of have to guess where to poke it up. If you accidentally poke it up in the wrong place and you don't want it to be there, just pull your needle out and then put it back. Remember, you're stitching all the way around. If you go too fast, sometimes you might get your thread tangled. So when you're pulling that thread through when you're pulling the needle through the felt, just do it nice and slow so that you keep your thread untangled. Oops. Once you have that piece sewn all the way around, once you have your thread sewn all the way around your piece, you are all done. You need to flip it over to the back and make a knot. I like to use the end of my needle to help me make a knot. You're going to make sure that it is pulled nice and tight so that it is secure. And then with a pair of scissors, you can cut off the extra. any piece that needs to get sewn onto the front of your finger puppet, you're going to follow those exact steps. You are going to hold the piece in place, sew it around the edge, and then tie a knot and cut it off. Now let's say that you have something that you want to stick out. For example, maybe you have some ears, or maybe you had hands or legs, something that you want sticking off of your finger puppet. I'm going to use this same color pink, and it's already on my needle, which is awesome. So on the other end, I can just make a quick knot. You should never poke your needle through the thread unless you have a knot on your you should never poke your needle through the felt unless you have a knot on your thread, or else the thread is going to go right through. Okay, so now I've got a knot. I've got the thread inside of my needle. Since I want the ear to stick out from my pig, I'm going to hold it in place exactly where I want it to be. I'm going to take my needle and start from behind, and I'm going to poke up through the felt again through both of my pieces, making sure that it's going through both pieces. Now this time I don't have to stitch it all the way around the edge. I only have to stitch it where I want it to stay. So I'm going to go up and down. I just have to go across the bottom of the ear because that's the only part that I'm really sewing together. So anything that sticks off of your finger puppet, you just need to make sure that you're sewing it securely to this so that this doesn't fall off. Okay, now since I want my other ear to be stitched with the same color, I actually don't have to make a knot and cut this off. I can keep it right where it is and just sew my other ear on. So I'm going to hold my ear in place right where I want it. If you have an extra piece, I like to stick it behind the main part of your finger puppet so that it kind of hides the edge of it, because if I were to put it on front, then it would not really look as nice. I think it looks better if it's behind your finger puppet. So I'm going to put this behind. I'm going to hold it in place where I want it. Remember, you always start from underneath your felt, so I'm going to take my needle and poke it up under my felt. I'm going to make sure it goes through both pieces and then pull it all the way up. And then I'll go back down. And then up and down to make sure that it's really secured on there. Once I know for sure that the ear or whatever you're sewing is sewn on, then you can make a knot and cut off your extra string. The first step for your finger puppet is making sure that all of the detail extra pieces have been sewn onto the front. So once all of your pieces are on the front where you want them to be, then you can move on.